Hey, I'm on a tight schedule, so I'll be quick. So last week I had a meeting for Turk Labs, Turk Meals to be precise, and it was like a meeting with my fellow project manager and the rest of the team. And I talked about how I think the meeting could have been much better. It wasn't bad, but there was multiple steps I could have taken to improve the productivity of the meeting and just the general flow of it. And I'm very glad to say that I took all those steps and implemented into the this week's meeting and was much better. Thank you. I was really worried about that. I don't know why. I think maybe it's because it's a good indicator for future success or future cohesiveness amongst the team or just like collaboration or like friendship and all that. But also think I take it very personal when like team stuff just don't work, right? If it's like any group that have any if I'm serving in some leadership way or something like that, I see the things aren't working. In my head, that's like a personal responsibility, a personal failure in itself. So I'm very glad to say that that wasn't the case today. We're much better. I think the steps that contributed to that first, I came prepared. So the night before, I stayed up to around like 2 a.m. ish, just working on figuring out what I wanted to say, what were the most critical items. I talked to my fellow project manager. I read up and made sure I was caught up essentially on all the inner workings of the team, what was missing, what we were meant to cover, what we haven't covered yet, the to dos and the future to dos. I could guide us in the right direction. If you look back, I think it's a blurry coming cinematic mode for the iPhone, but I did like a something up there. But I was doing some stuff, so I'm not gonna go into the weeds of this. But for the app right now, for the backend people, there's a couple layers we kind of have to tackle. We have to tackle the data layer, the cloud infrastructure layer, and the API layer. The way I see it, the data layers were more so how we structure and manipulate the data for our purposes. The API layer is how we retrieve that data in the first place. The cloud layers is just how we're gonna host the app. That's pretty much all you need to know for that. So that was one of the things I think helped a lot. Because last meeting, it was more so like it was the blind leading the blind essentially. And I think that's what messed up. Another thing, I think I'm really grateful for my internship for this is I made sure to have like an icebreaker, right? And I wasn't meant to be like a cheesy one, just like, hey, while we're still waiting for other people to join the meeting, who's the most famous person you guys have met? The reason I say I'm grateful for my internship is because as a person, sometimes I can be very fast and just like quick with it. 'Cause I don't know if it's I don't know if like those small talk stuff is actually useful or like if it's like it feels like I'm forcing upon someone. But then I had my mentor at the internship, and every time I was like, "Oh, hey, can you help me with this real quick?" or this, blah blah blah, or I'm having issues with this, or I asked him a question. He was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" That's like that was always his response before he responded back to my question. So eventually I just caught up and just kept on doing the thing as well. Like before I ask anything, I say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Because also the reason I hadn't done it before was that I felt like it gave a wrong intent because it seemed like I was being fake in the sense like I'm asking how you're doing, but I don't actually care because I go and ask you a question right after. But I think it's just a nice, polite way. So stuff like that I do think are important. I got to see how important it was in my previous meeting last week when I didn't do something like that. So this meeting, having the having the icebreaker was a nice way to kind of break the tension, just get people to talk. Because this meeting, that was something I was very intent that was going to happen. That I don't care what the situation and your background is, you're going to have to communicate your ideas, your critiques, your intent, and all that. So that was something that helped a lot. I also think it just makes it a bit more social. I think every now and then you need to bring back that social atmosphere, especially online, because it's really hard to recreate it. Um, in terms of other stuff that helped, I think those were the two major ones. I still think just being very intense. I think last week um, I think I was very, I don't want to say insecure, 'cause I always spam the word insecure, but I think I wasn't confident in the role that I had as project manager. Because as project manager, it feels weird because like I'm still new to this as well. But also as project manager, there's a project I'm managing. So I have to make sure as a team we're on the same page, we have the same direction. I understand where you're coming from, your skills, your background, your goals. So I can make sure we all get to the same place, you and your goals and the team's goals. So then this meeting, I was much more, I think, confident. As like sometimes I'll like make like I'm trying to say it in a non-negative way, but sometimes I like make sure the meeting goes in a specific direction. Like I'll steer it because last week I was more scared. Like maybe I should be more hands off or something like that. Like okay, if we give like if we enter like a awkward chunk where it's like okay, no one's talking, right? Like we're meant to get feedback. I'll just say okay, you know what we're gonna do? I'm just gonna go like okay, hey, what do you think? Hey, what do you think? It's like it's much easier than I'm just not gonna wait for the awkward thing to be there for like 5 minutes. So that helped a lot and eventually like people were just talking more naturally. I always love when that happens. I think a big thing it's kind of like what's the thing here? Will I use kinetic and static friction? I don't think that works here. But the idea is that once an object is in motion, it tends to stay in motion. And when an object is at rest, it stays at rest. So I feel like once you get the ball rolling, where people are just talking, it's easier. So I remember at the start of the meeting, like people weren't just talking without direction, essentially, like without being called on. But eventually people are, oh, I have a question about this. Actually, this is an idea, or I'm lost here. I think you should do this, blah blah blah. And that was much more natural. So I think I'm going to continue with that same approach. Where it's like if there needs to be a hands-on approach, then I'll put my hands on. But if it eventually will grow to be like leave the bird's nest and all that, I think the analogies are getting a bit confusing here. But it was really nice. I'm really really glad with how we're progressing as a team and as a project. I think it's in the right direction. Now, what's the next steps really are to divvy up. We have our front end team and we have our back end team. So now what we're trying to do here is kind of have them have their own meetings because really not every front end person needs to be in every back end meeting and vice versa. So I really want to increase our productivity by having meetings more frequently and having them do their own meetings where it's just much faster. Because like okay, hey let's do this, and back and we can do this and this. So that's the goal there. So I have to make sure that's going on. We had two no shows. I have to also follow up with them. And then on Friday we have a one of the people who developed the current app at its current state is going to do a breakdown of their process building the app, what mistakes they ran into, so we don't repeat the same mistakes, and we just go from there. So I'm going to be really excited about that for Friday because I really am curious what certain design choices, especially I just also want to know who are the contacts, especially for the API stuff, because I'm really curious how we're going to achieve that data. Um, but yeah, that's where it is. I'm just really excited. I think like I can't um state how excited I was after the meeting because like it was such a big improvement. I think that's something I'm very very intent on just improving and improving and improving. So I'm really happy that it was better. Um, but yeah, besides that, I have nothing else to say. So have a great day.